Welcome to this session with Denise Pereira Carvalho. We're going to be talking about developing intrapreneurs, not entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs. Denise's forte is innovation and entrepreneurship. And Denise is also skilled in negotiation, business planning, innovation management, strategic planning, and business process improvement. But Denise, I think that's probably your standard LinkedIn introduction. Can you give us a better introduction? Welcome, by the way.
Yes, sure, John. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be talking to you and to your audience today. Hello, everyone. My name is Denise Pereira Carvalho. So a brief introduction. I come from a 25-year experience in corporate. That's where I took my inspiration on entrepreneurship. I'm a design thinker and have been dealing with innovation for the last 7 years, full dedicated to it. Have had the chance to lead an innovation center in Brazil with the DuPont company where I was until 2020. And my intention today is to share a little bit of all those insights, experience, and reflections with you today. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Denise. You're going to give us a talk today, I believe, on developing intrapreneurs. How did you even get involved in design in the first place? Like, where did it all start for you?
Okay, so I'll tell you a brief story. When I joined the Innovation Center here in Brazil, my first day I was taught to run in brainstormings with customers. So that was my beginning, and I wasn't comfortable. You know, I wasn't feeling all right meeting people for the first time, 9 a.m. and delivering Post-its. Nothing against Post-its, nothing against brainstorming, but I think done in a dry way like this, it didn't work for me. So after this first day of work, when I knew very little about innovation, I started to research. That same evening, I got back home, I put my laptop on my lap in the couch, and I started to research stuff about innovation, and I thought something's missing. And I came across two methodologies that I really enjoy and use basically in my life and since then, which is the design thinking and Lego serious play. And when I came across the design thinking methodology, it all made a lot of sense to me, that you start a process with empathy. You start a process worrying about your user. So it all was a big deconstruction in the best use of the term to me to start my innovation process. So since then, I have been searching, studying, applying, trying, making mistakes since then and learning from it. And it has been such a journey. That's how it started. It started from me feeling uncomfortable, John, with normal brainstorming without empathy, you know.
So thank you, Denise. My introduction to design was quite late. I was involved in delivery for many years, and it was only in the last few years that I actually realized that a lot of the stuff that we were delivering was making things worse. And a lot of the work that we were delivering wasn't actually being used, or wasn't being used the way we thought it might be used. Now, it's okay for something to be used in a way that you didn't expect, and kind of like a boon, if you like, if something gets accepted. But it was more kind of a negative response. So we actually weren't really checking in even whether a lot of the work that we were doing was making a difference. We weren't doing it in a specific way, shall we say. And so I've been very encouraged by the whole world of discovery, where you run lots of experiments to even figure out whether there's something here to build. Is there even a product here? Is it even the right customer? Are we looking at the wrong needs? Talking to people. But at the same time, not just focusing on one person, one customer, and thinking that they're a representation of, I made those mistakes too, kind of thinking they represented everybody. So I find it so refreshing and enlightening when I deal with people from product management and from design, and I'm delighted that you're here today to talk to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. My pleasure. And going through our intent today, which is encouraging people to be entrepreneurship. So a little bit of a story again. I actually lost my job in 2020, and actually was so inspiring to be leading an innovation center. And I thought, well, maybe this is the time to go by myself. So I opened a company called Ampliarium, and the slogan, let's say, is innovation for human development. So that's my main objective, is that we can pay attention to the human part of the story, which is super design thinking oriented, I must say. And the idea today is, and that's my field of study, how we amplify, right? That's the name that comes from a Latin word, a place to amplify. So my idea here is, in a humble way, to share with you guys my reflections about it. But I'm keeping being a student. Most and for all, I'm a student. So encouraging you guys to amplify. And I would like to start by, and you're going to see that in my presentation, deconstructing some myths about innovation. The first one is, I personally don't connect to the kind of innovation by terror, right? When you say, well, you must innovate, otherwise your company will die, you're going to starve, all those panicking that we hear a lot in the social media. I don't like it. I don't connect to it, because I think we miss out on people's creativity and we encourage defenses. So I prefer to go through the creativity way. And all the slides you're going to see here they are built under the belief, and I'm sure about it, that everybody's creative, everybody's capable in different ways, and we need everybody. So that's part of the encouragement. And we need to talk about 2020, in my opinion, John, because I think we had our belief systems very threatened, right? So we have all the structures we knew, and power and control, the way we work, the way we innovate. So all the bases we are needing now to reconstruct the bases. And I think it's so important to talk about innovation, design, entrepreneurship, and creativity, because we are in a moment in humanity, in my opinion, that we cannot waste humans' creativity any longer. And I hope the pandemic leaves this legacy. We cannot be anymore wasting this creativity. So we have to build a bridge ahead of us from 2021 onwards, in my opinion. And if we were able to be until 19 participants, we are invited now to be integrants, to integrate, to interact. And I would like to talk a lot about that in a not only systemic way to see innovation, but an ecosystemic way to see innovation. And if we think about those two words, be participants and be integrants, they are very different, right? When I invite you to participate on something, it implies that the rules are already established. You're here to join something that was already built. When we are talking about integrating, asking people to integrate something, we imply that the rules are going to be built together. We leave some room to the emergence of new ideas, of new questions, of things that we didn't think about. So it's a free and open space. And to do that, we need to imply ourselves. Here's an example. We usually say, and this is a picture of my beautiful São Paulo city, very busy traffic. We usually say, I'm late because I got stuck in traffic, as if my car was not making the traffic. So we tend to see ourselves detached from the process, especially if it's a bad process. We try to see that we are not part of it, right? And to be integrants from now on, we need to imply and see ourselves as a party in the system that is really important to share ideas and to be part of it. And I would like to start this reflection with you guys, bringing an example and a mindset that I think can be very helpful from now on. Uh, this is Paul Barron, a very brilliant guy. So a little bit of story. In the early 60s, what happened was there was the Cold War, and the so-called Soviet Union at the time placed a missiles test in Cuba, leaving the US very vulnerable. Just 140 kilometers away from the US, they were testing missiles in the beginning of the 60s. So the US government thought, well, how could we think of a way to be less vulnerable in case of an attack with our communications, with our nets of communication? How can we redesign that? And even if they were attacked, they could react. So they approached the company Rand Corporation at the time in Santa Monica, and Paul Barron was a young engineer at the time. And in 62, he came up with this paper called On Distributed Communications, and the famous, this is the missiles test photo, by the way. I forgot to put that. But anyway, so Paul Barron came with the famous Barron's diagram at the time. And I think that is so useful, and we're still trying to deal with that and to benefit from it. But what he said was, we have these three types of managing nets. Let's take communication nets, right? So on the left, you have a centralized net, which is the most vulnerable one. So if you hit the center, you hit all the dots, everyone. You have in the middle a decentralized net or multi-centered net, where you have multiple centers of command. It's less vulnerable. And you have on the right side what it's called a distributed net, where you have much more room and you can connect the dots without those points of management or control. But we're talking here about communication, maybe internet, computer systems, but let's take the Barron's diagram to think of organizations for a moment. And if we think of the middle one, the decentralized model, it's placed in our society and our mindset so deeply in every aspect of society. We can easily see corporations there, the multiple departments, different managements. We can see the way schools are managed, churches, even architecture, the way we design our houses might be in a decentralized model. And what I believe happened in 2020, those centers were somehow either destructed or threatened, or we need to rebuild it somehow. And we were kind of forced to be in a distributed model all of a sudden. Not that we did not have the technology to do so. We already had the technology, but we didn't have the mindset. So we are in the middle, rebuilding this process. And I think it has all to do with innovation. The way we can take advantage of a distributed network in the way we do innovation. And I would like to talk a little bit about the phenomenon that happens if we consider a distributed model. And by the way, the dots are basically in the very same position. What changes completely the way we see it is the way they are connected. So my invitation is for us to be conscious that we are part of this incredible net. And our companies, our corporations are just one dot in the middle of a very big network that we, in my opinion, tend not to explore completely because we are so into this human struggle, right? That we all have to be challenged, the challenges we have to face. So when we talk about this interaction, which leads to connectivity, we have some things that happen, right? The more we have a distributed possibility, we interact more. So The more distribution we have, the more connectivity we create. The more connectivity we create, more interaction happens. Out of interaction, we have four important phenomena that rise in the horizon for us to think about and to encourage. And I'm going to link in a second to entrepreneurship, how entrepreneurship is so important to make this happen, to orchestrate all this. So the first one, the interaction outcome, let's say, is clustering. So everything that interacts has the potential to cluster. So here we have people presenting people. When we get together, we find out what our colleagues are doing, what they are needing, what customers are needing that we did not talk, because we have those decentralized model. If we think of the diagram again, I'll come back for one sec. In the middle diagram, we see here, right, all the departments. We need to talk to someone. For me, if I'm down here in one of the nets and I want to talk to someone on the top, I need to talk to my boss, and then I need to talk to his peer. Go. And I need to talk to, it's hard. It's much harder. So the more we interact, easier it is to reach people, right? So people find out stuff when they cluster. The second is swarming. Swarming is based on a collective intelligence, right? From nature. We are part of nature. We also have this potential to work collectively, right? And the system organizes itself, has the potential to organize itself. So here we don't have a manager of the birds or a manager of the fish. It organizes itself because it is a collective intelligence. Swarming is very related to cloning. We are imitative beings. We are able to imitate a lot. And by the way, people imitate us. So it's important to be conscious. How would you like to impact people? Because we are social beings. We are imitating and being imitated all the time, although we don't have the conscious that it happens. But if we connect to people that knows something, we have access to that knowledge. It's impossible to know it all. So we need to know people that know stuff that we don't, right? And what we are able to do individually, it's completely different from what we are able to do collectively. So I just bring an example here that got very famous at the time. It was Oprah's birthday, and the group of Black Eyed Peas made a special gift for her. So they placed people in the audience. If I'm not wrong, was like 20,000 people, and just a few knew the dance, the choreography, and the rest were imitating. And in a few minutes, the whole audience were dancing together. It's a kind of a metaphor for us to think, how can we better dance with our teams, our groups, our customers, distribution, whatever is in your chain? How can you connect in a clever way or in a more open way to extract this collective intelligence? The fourth outcome of interaction is crunching, the phenomenon of a small world. So if we reduce the intermediates, we can reach someone much faster than we would if we were talking about a decentralized model and a centralized model. So it reduces the famous 6 degrees of separation, which means we need 6 levels of relationship to reach anyone in the planet. And even Facebook in 2011 already measured much less than that. So the probability from now on is that it reduces even more. And I keep saying we can work with anyone. Here we are, John, you and I, you are in London, I'm in Sao Paulo. We never saw each other in person, and someone connected us, someone that we both know. And here we are, talking to an audience, and we can work with anyone.
It's wonderful.
Isn't it? I think it's amazing. And we have the only block is in our minds, right? We don't have this block anymore. We don't have this barrier. We can reach anyone with LinkedIn and work with someone from the scratch. So that's another amazing phenomenon, that the world is smaller. It is completely smaller. It's going to be even more. So what we're saying, I take an example here of, I love the mentality that Howard Gardner helps us having with the multiple intelligences, with, how we can make use in the best way of the word, enjoy having different intelligences together, because thank God we're not the same, right? Thank God. For example, I have a terrible spatial intelligence. If I'm on the street and I came from a different road, I get lost so easily. So why not inviting someone who is good at it to be with me, right? And understanding each other's intelligences, and not judging, and not, because one is an introvert doesn't mean they're not super smart. And how can we add people to the equation all the time? How can we be this bridge? Go ahead, Jim.
Are you referring to playing to people's strengths?
Exactly. And not trying to compete, because I think we compete quite often, and we don't realize by adding people we're bigger. We become bigger when we add people. We don't become smaller when we add people. We become bigger.
So there's one thing kind of striking me so far. Well, if I just look back over the last year, Denise, the people they are swarming, they are crunching. They're probably need to see more evidence of cloning in my world, but take your word for that it's happening. And it was a great example that you gave. What I've noticed though is that people seem to have got incredibly busy. They were trying to balance their home life, whatever's going on at home, the homeschooling, all that kind of stuff. So actually, in some cases, people had to kind of set expectations that they were trying to do less work. But a lot of people didn't feel they had that safety to say that. So they ended up kind of starting earlier in the day, finishing later in the day. Okay, they had more flexibility during the day. But overall, what I've noticed just in my little world is the amount of creativity going down, that people were more focused on execution than, getting together, trying to innovate, trying to, it could be just the teams that I was working with, right? But what has your experience been over the last year, Denise? What have you noticed?
I was actually, this last year, I was, making my company work. So I was not as having the same level of experience you're having with corporations. I saw that happening with friends, John. And I think we are in trial and error, right? But one good aspect that I think that is happening is that I think it's very important that we used to detach a lot of our personal and professional lives, or like, for example, if we show, here's Ale, hello Ale. So if we're talking here and my children come in, right, that would be, wow, my God, you're not being professional or something like that. And now it has become so normal, and we are more able to be entire. You don't need to leave your feelings at the parking lot. You can get into the office with your feelings. And so, but still you're learning, because it happens so suddenly that you have to deal with, homeschooling and be back home. We were brought back home to see how schools are going, and we are having more chance to see how our children are learning these days. So it's a lot to digest, but I think in the end it's going to be beneficial when we can balance.
Yeah, I can go along with that. People have been more human. They didn't feel they had to be so professional, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but that we're the dog or the cat would join, or children would join, and it was okay, it was fine, and it kind of helped to improve the empathy level as well between people. I think where people kind of get a bit lost is when they rush from one session to another. So be very encouraged by some companies, for example, setting their diaries up so that if you set up a half an hour meeting, that it only books for 25 minutes. And if you book for an hour, it only books actually 50 minutes. So people have time to chat at the end of the call, and or at least they don't need to rush off, or, they can get time to take a little bit of a breather. So I think it's all about trying to not kind of out Zoom yourself during the day, or, just kind of try to find the space, time to think, really.
Yeah. And I think, John, many people, my personal perspective, I think many people were it's normal to have a fear to lose their jobs. So they are trying to be super productive. I cannot talk because I did lose my job. So I was already, in the situation. But I think in this fear could be leading people to try to be super productive. Maybe there's something to.
Yeah, thank you. Okay,
Anyway.
Please carry on. Thank you very much.
Okay, no, you're welcome. So, and then I think this figure of entrepreneurship, which, by the way, people think that the entrepreneurs, the innovators, or whoever is dealing with creativity are those guys in sales and marketing, or, a specific department in the company. And again, I think we need everybody. So regardless of your position, where you work. Yesterday, I was talking to a buying group, and they were saying, how can we be more creative or use design thinking in the buying process? We can use innovation in any function. And this mindset of being an entrepreneur inside an organization is very important, because you become the bridge or the movement to make it happen, to think systemically, to include people, to innovate with people instead of for them. So this is a big invitation to innovate with instead of innovating for. Nothing against innovating for, but if you innovate with, you have more possibilities to see ideas emerging that you did not think about. And go ahead, John.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like? So doing something for our customers as opposed to doing something with the customer.
Yes, sure. When we do for them, we tend to create ideas with colleagues or within our corporation. And within our corporation, people tend to think in the same way. Let's think, people work in the same company for many years with the same leaders, the same values, the same mission, same products, all the same, right? So if you start an innovation process with your customers or with your distributors or whoever is important in your chain, like the buying guys I was talking yesterday could invite their vendors to the innovation process, you start to refresh your ideas, to refresh your perspective, because my perspective is just one perspective. As soon as I talk to you, John, my perspective amplifies, and I get to know something I didn't, right? So starting the innovation process with, you are much more likely to get closer to your customer's real need. Or even more, you can help them find out what they need. Because it's funny, when you ask people, what do you need exactly? Tell me. People struggle to answer. If you ask your customer today, tell me what you need. I'm going to do it. Just tell me. They're not going to reply straight away, because they also are challenged with their own issues, which many times are not so clear.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story that you told me on the podcast as well, the Exagility podcast. And there was this woman, and she bought yogurt for the family, I think,
yeah.
And she thought there was a lot of protein in the yogurt, but actually there wasn't. But that was her image of the yogurt, and so she bought it. And so one of the things you were trying to help the company with was understanding that it doesn't matter if the customer is wrong. This is what the customer thinks.
Exactly.
And what are we going to do about that? Because that seems to be tapping into something, a need or a want that the customer has that maybe we're not serving it, but the customer thinks we're serving them. So yeah, customers really struggle to articulate what they want. And often when what they want, what they need doesn't fit our product agenda, there's a tendency for us to bounce the idea out of the product group, isn't there? Because we don't do that stuff. That's not what we do.
Exactly. I usually say we love to hear the customer's opinion as long as it's the same as mine, right?
Yeah.
If it's the same as mine, great. You're gonna buy my product. I'm gonna be happy. I'm gonna make my numbers, be good with my boss, and that's it. It's so hard to take ourselves out of the equation. Because when the person says, "Well, I'm buying the yogurt because it is protein based," and even if it's not, that's when a new idea can come. A new idea arrives. We say, okay, she thinks she's buying something with protein and there is no protein. Can we build something with it? Would that be an idea? Would that be a starting point for us to develop a new product, instead of only thinking vertically about what I'm selling right now?
I'm curious if you ever put the protein into the yogurt afterwards, but maybe that might be giving away some company secrets.
Well, they didn't. The group didn't at the time, but anyway, that was our reflection.
Yeah. Yeah.
How to deal with it. And back to the entrepreneurship environment, John. I think I was also talking yesterday, and the funny thing about people say, "Let's think outside of the box" all the time, right? And I think the journey of intrapreneurship, it's actually thinking within the box, because I think can bring an anxiety to people, because we say all the time, think outside the box, as the life was freely and open, and then people come back to their offices and they struggle so much with the level of resistance, and they say, well, I'm not able to think outside the box, so let me come back to my old style. But the tricky thing is to be able to think outside the box being inside one.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah, because there are constraints.
There
There are some
is.
rules that we have to comply with and so on.
There is a box, and let's be friends with it. Yes, there's going to be resistances. Yes, you need to repeat yourself. Yes, no, not everyone will agree with you. Thank God, not everyone will agree with you, because we have the opposers. And what do we do, honestly, when when we are kicking off a project? We think if we invite or not the opposer. I'm confessing here, and I'm sure our audience has been in that same situation. So you are kicking off a project and you have that opposer. Do you invite or not? And I would say invite him or her, because they're going to help you to think in a different direction. They're going to challenge you. Be open to be challenged. It's not easy, but it's rewarding.
It's a gift, actually, because I prefer people saying no to my face than just giving lip service and almost being kind of passive aggressive and pretending to support whatever you're doing, but actually they're not really supporting it. And it's almost impossible to deal with that lip service. It's like toxic behavior, and I'm not sure there's a way to kind of eradicate that. But just being authentic, I guess, and being open, I really appreciate it. So I take it as a gift, actually. And often those people can be your biggest champions in the end.
Exactly. Because if they started with a no, and you convince him otherwise or her otherwise, they're gonna be an ally, in the end. You're right. So I think this intrapreneurship, first, you need to consider a box. Yes, there is a box, and there is nothing wrong with it. And the challenge is how you keep a free thinker within the box. It's easy to be a free thinker with friends, being an entrepreneur with your own company, writing your book the way you want to write it. But within a corporation, you do have a box. So how you manage this, and the intrapreneur actually goes against culture. That's why the human part is so important, because you need to be good with yourself to face resistance, right? You are against the culture. The culture wants to keep doing the way they're doing, and we need that to happen. We need to be right to operate. You need those guys worrying about the standards, and then you are against the culture trying to add new stuff. So the term intrapreneurship was used at this first time in 1978, quite many years ago, right? So implement some of the definitions. I usually don't take one as the right one because we're building this process, but I just got inspired by some definitions I saw on the internet. But implementing startup practices into a large organization producing valued innovation. And by the way, we envy the startup behavior, which we can benefit a lot from. However, the startup, when it becomes large, it starts having the large companies' issues. It's going to be a big box again, So how can you keep refreshing and encouraging entrepreneurship into the system, into the process in a productive and fruitful way? Go ahead, John.
I'm just curious, maybe you'll get to it, but
Yeah.
how you'd recognize an entrepreneur candidate, potential entrepreneur. So maybe when you find a suitable point, we can maybe talk about
Well,
that.
no, I think we can talk now so we don't forget. That's a good point, and I hear that from the customers asking me, what do you think? Who should I get? I usually say, John, first, someone that empathizes, someone that first has the energy, and a passion for the process, that is okay with repeating 1,000 times, because if you're talking about a large corporation, you repeat 1,000 times again and again and again. Someone who is empathic, that navigates throughout the company, that don't that is okay with opposers. When I say that an empathic person is okay with someone disagreeing with him or her. So I would say those two are vital. Someone that is, energetic, passionate about it, who really believes in people and can navigate throughout the company, because it's going to need a level of energy. But I think more than that, we still have a mindset of a few people being entrepreneurships. And I think we all need to develop that to a certain point. We all need to be open. Of course, someone is going to be the ambassadors and going to be the reminders in the group. But and I hope leaders that listens to us get inspired to create this space for more people to be entrepreneurs.
You mentioned, Denise, about having been able to navigate the organization. And when I hear that, I'm kind of translating that to has a big network, has very strong informal influence, which might mean that the person has been in the organization for quite a while.
True.
Might even be close to retirement. I mean, have you noticed some kind of profile in terms of, okay, you mentioned some of the qualities, some of the characteristics, some of the traits, but in terms of, what have you noticed patterns, things that are uncommon between the entrepreneurs in terms of their age profile, for example, how experienced they are? Have you seen people brand new in off the street actually being able to make changes like this inside organizations?
It's a good question, John. And I don't know if I have one answer to that. I think you do need to understand the company a little, at least. I don't think you need to be for a lifetime in the company. And one thing that people are open to, when I said empathy, even if you're young or young in the company, not so long in the company, if you're empathic, people don't feel you are trying to compete or you're trying to diminish them, because every time you come with something new, what blocks people is fear, right? If you get them with a level of safety or invite them in, even if you don't know so much of the company, or if you're not so long, and you get people get inspired. I think people want to create, and that's my perspective. And I had the pleasure to receive over 10,000 people in 7 years, and I have not seen someone, when you're asked and you give the space and you credit them, you say, I believe you can, that hasn't replied in a constructive way.
Nice.
I'm not saying they will reinvent the wheel, but they will at least be open to participate, to integrate, to interact. So if we see Steve Jobs, this is just an extract of an interview he gave in 85. He was saying about the Macintosh team that defining entrepreneurship, the group of people going, in essence, going back to the garage, but in a large corporation. So that's the spirit of, yes, let's experiment. And that's when design comes again, John. If you're a design thinker, you're open to trying, to experiment, to make mistakes, to see things as a prototype, right? So this garage spirit of doing that, although you are in a big corporation. And by the way, this can be the best of two different worlds, right? You have the big structure, but at the same time, you can try stuff. So that could be very beneficial to the team, to the person, and to the company. So my invitation here is how could you explore your ecosystem better? Understanding that you are one dot in this big net. We are, and we forget we are because we are too pressed. Like you said, with the pandemic, working 10 hours a day, one meeting back-to-back meetings all day. So how can we be conscious that we are part of a bigger net, and the other person in my chain can give me a great idea to this process? This is part of the innovating with again. Who else could you innovate with? Not only your company folks, they are also welcome, of course. And I think we need to dare not to know. The space of not knowing is so fearful, So when we don't know, especially our generation, John, we were trained to know, right? We were trained to know. We need to be the person who has the answer, the experts. And then again, we can get inspired by the startups that they dared not to know. Oh, they dare to be comfortable with. So I don't know if we're back. You're back. So empathize, be curious, question the questions. Why we are doing this the way we are doing? How is my user receiving the information that I'm giving? Is my report being read or not? Bear doubt if you're having questions. Yeah, Ale is saying so uncomfortable. It is so uncomfortable not to know. And then explore, ideate, experiment. So those design thinking tools can be such an asset in this process.
And here's the thing about innovation, that we actually need fresh thinking, don't we? Which means that we're not relying on the experts to have all the answers, that we might get people from different schools of thought who might not have even that much experience in what we do, but mixing those people up with experts can really help you to find things that maybe you wouldn't have come across before. So yeah, I love Ali's comment. Thank you, Ali, for that, daring not to know.
Yeah,
it is so hard.
And I love this slide too, John, because I usually say, start wherever you are. There is another thing, another myth about innovation. People believe, how do you guys say in English, the neighbor's grass is greener? Is that right? How do you say that, the expression?
Yeah, the grass is greener on the other side.
On the other side. Thank you for that. So we have this tendency as humans to think, well, I haven't done this course, I haven't read this book, I haven't tried this tool, or I'm not ready. So we play so quickly ourselves in this I'm not ready space. And I have been talking to customers, start wherever you are. The space you are is sacred, regardless what you have done, your background, your age, doesn't matter. The point where you are is the starting point. No excuses, right? So everybody is able to start an innovation process, a design process, an entrepreneurship process. Start where you are. And then I hear a lot about the Shreks, right? The Shreks are, here in the company, people are very old mindset and old school guys and blah, 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 blah. So, and I say, guys, look, I'm not afraid of the Shreks. And there's one reason I'm not afraid. I'm one myself, right? So I think we need to connect with the Shreks within us because we all have resistances. We are fearful of new things. We are not early adapters to everything. So we have our Shrek part. So as long as you connect with your Shrek, you are able to connect with everybody else. It's okay, right? So, and that's when I make the joke. I'm not afraid of the Shreks. If I have a team of Shreks, that's fine. To me, if they are on Earth, they have a heart, and that's all we need. So that's fine. So let's make peace with the Shreks. That's my advice, because people has always this. I have been hearing that a lot from customers that, we're not ready yet, or the team is not ready, or there's too much old school mentality or whatever. So I would be careful with that. We're all able of change, all creative. I put this photo here to remind myself to talk about the inside the box, but we did already, so I'll skip that. So be peaceful with your box. That's nothing wrong with boxes. Innovation has no badges. We spoke about that already, but and we've been there. I know Ale is listening to us, but we've been there many times with people asking, who should I invite to these innovation sessions? When you're thinking about co-creating with your network, that's a question that is very common. Who should I invite? And I usually reply, whoever is interested. It doesn't matter if the person is 18 and is interested in innovation, or if the person is 70 and is interested in innovation, and is an intern, or if it's 80s, all these labels that we put in people. Labels do not help. Let's get rid of them. Let's see people first. And then we are much more likely, when we co-create, when we innovate with, when we open space for the human to participate, we are much more likely to get connected with what is desirable to my customer, to my user. And by the way, it's not about us, it's about them. And we are so much likely, from my experience, my opinion, you guys think in your processes. To me, we're much more likely to stay in the circles below, thinking and demanding time for what is technically possible or financially viable. And we tend to forget the desire. Yeah, whoever is curious. Yes, I'll say whoever is curious is invited, is welcome, willing to participate. Sure. Thank you, Ali. So how can we connect with the desire, which is the inspiration of design thinking? How can we don't lose track of what is desirable to my user? And that, John, is the worst part ever in the design process. To first, if you create a good empathy and you have a good stage, you have a good project, right, of empathy, you've been there, you understood. When we are defining the challenge, which is hard, and even in the empathy process, it's so hard to take us out of the equation. Like you said, of the yogurt part. So I was telling John on the podcast that we were having an empathy exercise in the supermarket, trying to understand how users saw the yogurt. And the technical guys were so anxious because the customers were saying something that was not accurate. They were saying they were buying because it was a source of protein. And then in this empathy exercise, what we need to make sure is to manage our empathy monsters, right? By the way, I just want to give the credit. This monsters was credit to Claudio Tebas, which is really an amazing guy, a Brazilian guy that did this connection with empathy. And there is a TED talk by Carolina Nalon, who is also amazing about empathy, that I recommend. Anyway, what he says is we have this empathy monsters that gets in the way of us listening to people. And this could be anyone, customers, our families, our partners, right? What are the empathy monsters? The monsters that gets in the way from us to listening to people. So just a quick joke. The first monster is the statistics monster. So for example, I tell my husband, I'm too stressful. I think I'm going to quit my job. And then comes the monster of statistics saying, are you crazy? We are in a big of a pandemic. We are in a big, the number of unemployment in the country. You cannot quit your job. So when the statistics monsters come, he's not listening to me anymore. It's not anymore about me. It's about the statistics. We are so quick with embracing monsters. The second one, which my favorite, far my favorite, is my worst is best. What is that? We compete in tragedy, right? So you tell me, John, that you hit your car last week. And instead of listening to you, I just cut to your conversation and say, you don't believe what happened to my car last year. I lost a full car. It was a very bad accident. So I stop listening to you to tell you my case, which is worse than yours. We are that kind of people. We compete in the tragedy, right? So anyway.
That's sadly very true. Yeah.
So when do we stop listening? And it's so quite often, right? And the third, also very famous one, the one that has all the recipes, right? So you tell me a story. Instead of listening, I tell you what I did in your position. And if I did that and it worked, you should do exactly what I did. Right? We have do this and do that kind of speech. So we're making this joke to say, when we were in the supermarket and the technical guy approached me and said, what she's saying is wrong. There is no protein. And I said to him, look, this is a monster, because we give this in the training, right? So we prepare guys to go into the field knowing that we have monsters. And I go, just breathe in and breathe out. This is a monster. Just keep the monster aside and just listen to her, regardless if she's right or wrong. Just listen. And the person comes back, to the body. So it's important to be aware that we have monsters.
I'm curious how often people give kind of a very good reaction to that. When you say you make them aware. That's nice the way you do that, actually, making them aware that this might be an empathy monster. Do you find that people open their mind after you say that, or what have you noticed?
I think they do, John. I think I make the joke that they come back to the bodies, that because we are, moved by our beliefs, and it's again, this is so hard because you have to put the user first. Because when I'm trying to be right, I'm not putting the user first. I'm putting myself, my belief, my knowledge, my training first. And to be able to exempt myself and put my desire aside and listen to the user, I need to be very good with myself, right? There's a lot of self-knowledge in this, because I need to understand first. I need to notice that the monster is there. Many times we don't even notice. The monster takes the lead, jumps inside the conversation and destroys it, right? So to be able to first be present enough to notice the monster, deal with it, put it aside, and keep listening. That is a lot of energy. That's not easy, not small,
Yeah, there's another little monster that I can think of as well, which might be, and don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes there's almost a bias towards positivity, that everything must be good news. And I've seen it in a few companies, particularly banks, and there'd be like a whole load of bad news. Let's say there was a really bad employee survey or whatever, right? And but the leaders, they find the one or two little nuggets of goodness, and they emphasize those, trying to be positive, but also really not listening. But I also see that happening with when we when teams are delivering outputs and they're checking the outcomes, what difference do we make to customer behavior and so on, and the change isn't a good one, and this kind of positivity bias can actually drive a situation where people don't even see that something isn't working. Have you seen that yourself, Denise?
Yes, and I think what drives that is fear, right, John? Because I think you can still be positive, and in a positive in
Yeah.
a way. Because I think I agree with you, and I like that actually because I'm an optimistic myself, so I'm too biased to make an opinion. But anyway, I think the innovation and design process has a good level of optimism, and it's actually part of the process, right? What I mean by that is, it doesn't mean we don't acknowledge when, as you said, an indicator is bad. You can acknowledge that and be optimistic and positive on how to deal with that. But I think when people overlook it or emphasize only the good and don't talk about the bad, that is really bad. And why is that? Because people are left with the unsaid. That's kind of a pressure inside people, like the pressure pen. When you have to have a way to put it out, to talk about it, to digest. And when you overlook it, people don't trust the process anymore. You can face it, look at it, and be optimistic, finding a creative way to find new alternatives, but not overlook it.
Thank you.
Because I think those reports are based on people's opinion that needs to be acknowledged, right? So to coming to a wrap up, so my invitation is that we are able to see not only be participants, but also be creators, and I would say even more co-creators, that we think systemically, especially after pandemic. We need those collective intelligence after a big moment. I'm of course making this link with the pandemic situation we hope ending. We hope we're coming to an end, but we're going to need it to start a new paradigm, and we are building that right now. And that's why I think we cannot waste people's creativity and be co-creators, because alone we cannot do it. We need more kinds of intelligence. And if I can leave you guys with some takeaways that I was thinking, how can I summarize everything that we've spoke about, John? I would say, be open to interact. Think systemically and ecosystemically. Don't think only about your net, your dot of the equation. Imply yourself. You're part of the process. You can add stuff. You can contribute a lot. Don't expect everyone to agree with you. Opposers are welcome. We talked about that. They can help you think differently. Be a bridge to others' creativity. Ask, answer, keep your doors open. I think, by the way, keeping doors open are so good and welcome and create space to people. Invite others, co-create. Isent yourself, when we're saying about the monsters, right? Isent yourself and your desires from the innovation process. It's not about you. I'm sorry to say that. I'm sorry to bring this frustration, but no, it's not about you. It's about your user. And it's fine. That's good. Ideate, try stuff, be curious. When I say honestly curious, what I mean by that, you're not being curious because your boss asked you to do a VOC, a voice of the customer, because there is a new tool in your company that you need to use. Be genuinely curious. Be present to the curiosity. Don't get attached to the ideas, processes. Worry about the impact, the positive impact you're making people. Benefit from your ecosystem. You become bigger when you include people. We don't become smaller, we become bigger. Say your idea. I think this is a very important one. Say your idea. Don't keep it to you. You are unique. If you don't say it, no one else will do the same way you would. So if you don't speak up, an idea might be lost because only you could do that. Be in movement. don't underestimate yourself thinking, I didn't do this course, I didn't do this book, whatever you haven't done yet, that's fine. Start where you are. Don't let anyone do that to you either. Don't label yourself. You are ready, you are creative, go for it. And most importantly, I think the world desperately need all of us. So that's the message I would like to leave, John.
Denise, thank you so much for coming on the show. Denise's website is ampliarium.com.br. Denise, in terms of any developments that you've got coming up soon, even if you haven't got dates yet, do you have any plans, or what are your intentions in the coming quarters?
Thank you, John. Yes, I am bringing together an entrepreneurship module, and I will release dates soon. The modules actually, there are 3 modules or 2, depending on how the companies want to do it. And I really recommend the third, because the third is already an innovation, a pilot innovation session with a customer together. But the first 2 modules are exactly to create this space and knowledge. The first one, bringing a base of design and some innovation tools. The second module, we talk a lot about translating those tools to the company you are, given that we are considering the box and considering the intrapreneurship perspective. How can you translate those tools to your reality, your company? How can you include into your toolbox those behavior components, dealing with resistances, overcoming them, being okay with repeating yourself? So this module includes this behavior part of the story. And the third module is already an invitation to make a pilot session with customers. Because if we don't do that, we forget. We have a very quick curve of forgetting things we learned. So the idea is to put that into practice and open up the co-creation.
Thank you, Denise. Sounds really, really interesting. I want to thank you very much for coming on the show, and Alessandra Bonvini as well. Thank you very much for your engagement during this episode. Looking forward to seeing a lot more from you, Denise, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you.
Perfect.